we present Beowulf, an original adaptation, written and read for you by Jon Buckeridge. Part 4. Stirring in the Deep. Hrothgar stared at the great hall of Heorot, the graceful sloping roof like the hull of a ship, the runes carved around the door welcoming guests inside, the antlers mounted above the entrance that he himself had won from a stag he had hunted in his youth. He shut his eyes and breathed deep the smell of fresh-worked timber and the rich scent of earth and clay so recently disturbed. He heard the breeze dancing through the shingles on the roof, and the gentle sighs of the wood as it relaxed in the early evening cool. For years he had dreamed of this place, poured his imagination into it, shaped and honed his vision of it and the legacy it would leave for his children and his children's children. Now it was finally here, every bit as perfect as he had imagined. And Hrothgar wept, for Heorot stood empty. It hadn't always been. For the first glorious month, the folk of Daneland had danced and drank and made merry in the hall his dreams had birthed. They had welcomed babes, mourned at funerals, rejoiced at weddings, and celebrated the victories of his people. But then, without warning, all that had been taken from them. Now he stood alone, staring at the empty, echoing shell of his hopes, and wept. The first murder had been the least brutal, but the most shocking. It had been a month since Ecgtheow, Birgitta, and Beowulf had left to return to Geatland, and the Danes were gathered to welcome the new moon. The celebration was in full swing, and the drinking and dancing had reached a raucous height when young Svend, a warrior of the clan and the latest to be named to the ranks of sea wardens, had begged silence to address the crowd. With a great grin on his face he stood before the doorway, the stars of night shining behind him and the dancing firelight warm on his face. The air smelled of sweet smoke and warm bodies, and there was a thrill of excitement in the air. "My Lord King!" he cried so the whole hall could hear, "and my good Lady Queen!" There were cheers at that. Waltheow always brought cheers from her people. "We are, as ever, in your debt," young Svend had gone on. "Your great generosity to your people and your wise leadership has inspired me." They never found out what his generosity and leadership had inspired, because at that moment an arm, a huge, grey-skinned, sinewy arm, had reached through the open door and wrapped itself around Svend's middle. The arm was huge. It must have been as long as Svend was tall, but at first it didn't even seem like he noticed it, so fixed was he on the crowd. Hrothgar had seen it, though, and so had the others facing Svend. Gasps went up, a few breaths of alarm, but before anyone could think to shout a warning, Svend was gone, wrenched away into the dark behind him. As one, the Danes rushed to the door, their shock outweighing their caution, and ran out into the night to chase Svend and his abductor with shouts and cries of alarm. They did not find Svend. Only blood. Of the creature who took him there was no sign. The next night they had all been gathered again, this time for a sombre service in remembrance of Svend, so cruelly taken from their number. There was no dancing now, just a slow song, a dirge as folks shared memories of Svend and the life he had lived. This time Hrothgar managed to shout a warning for all the good it did. A young woman, Aoife, tall and willowy, with bright green eyes, who had always carried a torch for Svend, was saying her part, when through the doorway that great arm had reached. This time the hand grabbed hold of Aoife, grabbing her head as if it were an apple, and pulled. There was a frozen, horrible moment in the hall while everyone took in what was happening. Hrothgar cried out. They saw the grey, mottled flesh of the creature, the thin, wiry muscles shifting beneath its surface, the dark, slate-black claws on its 3-fingered hands as it held Aoife's head. Then they heard her muffled cries as the hand hauled back, and a sickening, wet snap as Aoife's body went limp. Again the Danes gave chase, and in the clear night they saw the creature carrying Aoife's broken body away. A huge horned creature stood silhouetted against the moon, as tall as a tree, but slim and slender. Its free hand reached down past its knees, tipped with those long, dark talons. In the other hand, dragging behind, her head still clutched in its hand, was the broken body of Aoife. As they watched, the creature took hold of her leg in its other hand and pulled, as a man might pull apart a well-roasted chicken. Sure enough, the leg gave way with a watery pop, and the creature crammed the limb into its monstrous mouth, beginning to gnaw and worry at it. This was too much for some, who passed out then and there. Others turned to vomit noisily, while others had a different reaction and let out a cry, giving chase to the creature as it stalked through the night. Perhaps their shouts had startled the monster because it ran into the night, but it did not stop it from returning. At first, the Danes fought, not willing to give up the hall of Heorot. Night after night their warriors would wait in the hall, axes, swords, and spears in hand. When the creature arrived, and that great arm reached in, they laid forth with all their might, striking and stabbing, but to no avail. The creature's ashen skin seemed impervious to their weapons, and all it served to do was anger it. Now the beast whipped back and forth with those taloned hands, slashing and slicing at the Danes. Finally, it claimed a grisly prize to eat, and off it stalked. As it strode away and the Danes tended to their dead, they heard a deep, grinding rumble of sound, and to their shock, they realized the creature was laughing. And so it went on. The Danes tried fire, water, ice, poison to wound the creature, but nothing worked. They tried tracking the beast to its lair, hoping it may be more vulnerable there, or they would find some clue by which to kill it. But some strange magic of the beast meant it left no tracks the Danes could follow. Knowing they could not harm it, the monster only grew bolder in its visits, and more warriors died. Before long, the Danes were forced to abandon Heorot by night, and while they could gather there by day, no one much wanted to spend time in a hall so soaked in the memories of those they had lost. And so, old King Hrothgar stood staring at the hall that should have been his legacy and weeping for its loss. The sun was dipping low now, and he knew he should turn to leave, but he needed just one more glance. As he dried his tears, 2 of his warriors arrived with the tribute, a yearling cow. For 4 years now they had lived with the ravaging creature in their lands, though now the Hall of Heorot was seemingly its territory, for none of the Danes dared go there. To keep it from ranging further into Daneland, they had taken to leaving a tribute of food tied up outside Heorot, and on finding that to gorge itself on, the beast seemed pacified enough. So Hrothgar and his people retreated to the hall of his fathers, in cold, dark, smoky misery. Even there they dared not hold feasts or music or merriment, lest the creature claim that hall as its own as well. And it was well they did not, for that was what had stirred the beast in the first place. Deep in the depths of the earth he had slumbered. He had no word for time. He was and he had always been, that was all he could know. When he hungered, he ate. When he lusted, he took. When he tired, he slumbered. And he had slumbered deeply, until that sound. It was not sound itself. He knew sounds, they came and went. He knew the sound of sea. He knew the sound of gulls. He knew the sound of mother. He knew the sound of prey. He knew the sound of death. This sound, though, was new to him. It was the sound of joy. He did not know that word, of course. All he knew was that this sound was something he did not know, something he could not know, something it was commanded never to be for him or for his kind. He knew a different thing, though. He knew hate. Hate for this new sound, hate for all who shared it, hate for all who knew its taste. Heaving his body up, he prowled forth from his region of the depths and searched this new sound out, that he might pluck out its eyes and suck the marrow from its shattered bones. He knew sky and moon and stars, and though he did not like them, they were better than the brightness, the burner. He would walk under sky and see by moon and stars. Following this new sound, he saw its face. Menfolk. They hid in their long, low, glowing cave, and they made the sound, the one he hated. Well, that was fine. He would give them different sounds. The sound of death and the sound of pain. Reaching into their cave, he broke one of them. He had forgotten how easy it was. He had forgotten how fun it was, simple, small menfolk who broke so quickly. They swarmed out of their cave now, looking for him under sky and stars and moon, but they would not see him, not yet, not until he wanted them to. Now they made a new sound, though, the sound of chaos. He liked that sound. Stars and moon would slumber soon, and he must return to the depths before the burner sat in the sky. Turning, he strode away, but he would return to the menfolk. He would keep returning to the menfolk, because now they made the sound of chaos, but soon they would make the sound of fear. And that was his favorite sound of all. Thanks for listening. Beowulf was a Settle Stories commission, written and read for you by Jon Buckeridge. Story editor was Miriam Sarin. Intro music was Warrior by Hartzman. Outro music was Travel in the Ocean by Monument Music. It was a Parable Arts production.